So here we are at Maker's Mark with Bill Samuels Jr. And we're, what, a year and a half into Maker 46? About a year?
Almost 2 years.
Almost 2 years.
Yeah, a little over a year and a half.
So this far into it, what's the kind of key learnings and kind of takeaways been from 46? Gone from more of a curiosity experiment to now a product.
Well, you hold your breath, or we did, because we really wanted to create something that would turn people's head. And you never know whether you're talking to yourself or whether you really have created a wow. And I think after a year and a half, it's pretty clear. We go to whiskey shows, we go talk to people, and it's 100% of the people that try 46. First, they can't believe it, then they sure can't believe it's 94 proof. And they're still, most of them, after 2 or 3 days of tasting it, are still waiting for that kick. And it never shows up.
Now, Makers has been really kind of the leader when it comes to the whiskey category of kind of giving consumers the idea that not all whiskey has to have bite or kick or be strong. And now we see, kind of a new generation of whiskey drinkers. Where was the genesis of that? Where did that whole philosophy kind of come from?
Well, the philosophy came back when Dad was. It really started during the Reconstruction after Prohibition, when Dad wanted to start over. They had to rebuild the distillery. They had plenty of time. That was the good time to try to take the bite out of the product, to actually create a bourbon that tasted good. And my grandfather was hearing none of it, so that was put on hold until. After Prohibition, after the Second World War. Dad retired, was driving Mom crazy, hanging around the house, and she said, go get a job. He didn't want a job. She said, why don't you go buy one of these failing distilleries, because they were falling down about one a week. It was a bad time for bourbon. It was really the end of bourbon. It was in sight, kind of like the Buggy Whip factory. And he went and bought this little place for $35,000. I was with him when he went to courthouse, and started experimenting, trying to create a bourbon that actually tasted good. And translated to him, that meant that all of the taste profile needed to be in the front half of the tongue, farther forward better. There's no bitterness forward. So that was and the fact that he started with an objective, the fact that all of his friends happened to be people that owned distilleries, and they all loved each other and they helped him. You never hear something like that today. And they really helped him create that very distinctive taste of Maker's Mark. It was a lot of fun. Me as a kid riding around with him on the weekends to go see Pappy and Jerry Beam and Lem Motlow's son down at Jack Daniels. I thought all the titans of various industries had that same relationship with each other. Mm-hmm. Little did I know that Coke and Pepsi don't operate that way.
So there's a famous story of your dad, quote unquote, burning the family recipe.
That was right in this room when it was a barrel room, and he wanted to. It was a big deal because we'd owned and operated distilleries here in Kentucky since the mid 1780s, and here it was 1954. It was 170 years since we started, and Dad was the sixth generation to own and operate a bourbon distillery in Kentucky, but he was the first to say, "Hey, I wonder if we can make it better by changing how we do it." And so we wanted that very first day, that very first batch that we made, he invited all his friends, plus all of the distillers that helped him create that taste. And they were down here. It was the only day of middle school I missed, and I'm down here. My sisters are here, both of them younger. And the younger one, who was about 7, Dad took this bucket right here, which we now use as a garbage can. It's an old yeast bucket, and took his family's whiskey recipe and wrinkled it up, put it down, add some more papers, put some lighter fluid, and lit it on fire. I thought he was lighting it on fire, and because of the fact that you have a constricted opening, actually created a rocket nozzle. And just as he dropped that match in, my sister looked over to see what was going on and caught her hair on fire. So that was our first and last family ceremony. Yeah, but she survived. Fortunately, she didn't get her eyes in the way, but it did singe her hair.
Now, I mean, we're let's see. So Makers has been in business producing since the 50s. How much different is what's going on now at Maker's Mark from the early days?
Well, it's a balancing act, and it's one. We have a rule here: no compromise. Okay, we don't compromise the product, even if we desire to make more, and even if there's more customers wanting to buy more. We have a responsibility to the U.S. Department of Interior, because this was the first beverage facility in the United States designated a National Historic Landmark. So we have a responsibility of preserving the old Victorian village. And we have a responsibility to be commercially sensible, which means growth, controlled growth, managed growth is okay as long as the product doesn't suffer along the way. And that's really been my life's work. Mom and Dad created the product, and my job, once it started to catch on, was not to screw it up. So when my son came in, or my job description when I came in was go find customers. My son's, when he came in and took over about 8 months ago, was don't screw it up.
Now, it seems like the whiskey market, there's an increasing pressure to put out, not just a product, but a line of products, and kind of hit every whim that a whiskey customer could have, from flavorings to different mash bills and stuff. How do you guys navigate through those waters?
Well, it's not how we navigate through it. I never believed in it. I mean, I thought it was just people throwing garbage against the wall, see what happened, and that's not exactly true. It's just that I've never been in an environment where it was successfully done. In the last couple of years, we've had the pleasure of working alongside a guy named Bill Newlands, who is the U.S. president of Jim Beam, and he is a natural. He can pick 'em. I just love to talk to him. And he's the first person that I've ever seen that has an instinct for what customers want. And fortunately, he agrees with us that we need to stick to our knitting, and we do. We got plenty of work to do to develop properly 46, which is a very difficult product to make consistently. And we got our hands full. Makers continues to grow at double digit. We're in our 34th year. 46 has exploded, scares us to death. So the last thing we need are other little distractions taking away from the inventory we have, because every drop of Makers is made down here in Loretta. Anything we would do to utilize some of that inventory for another product would take away from what's available for a product that's already in greater demand than we have supply. So it'd be like committing suicide to get too invested in that stuff. But I will say, if I die tomorrow, I will have seen at least one person that had a nose for what to do next. And I could list off the stuff, and I tell you, I thought almost all of Bill Newland's ideas were crazy, and damn near every one of them worked. Mm-hmm. So it's been a great education for me. None of them apply to us, but they certainly apply to building a large, successful, diversified spirits company.
So what's it been like turning the reins over to your son Rob?
It's been fun, but I knew ahead of time it was going to work, because we're great believers in personality testing and the role of an operating style in shaping wins and losses. I've also seen a lot of family companies where the entrepreneur, who's usually a gorilla, and that would be me, would turn the business over to the first son, who's totally unadapted to such pressures, and it just doesn't have the confidence or the imagination to do it. And in Rob's case, it's there in spades. So it's going to just get better.
Mm-hmm. What do you think the biggest challenge ahead for Rob is with Maker's Mark?
Oh, there's no question about it. it's carefully managing a very limited inventory when demand continues to soar way above our ability to supply. And, I mean, it looks like Makers has hit the tipping point, and the snowball is starting to roll on its own without, all the time I was here, it was always work. And I retired just when it started downhill. So, and I think that's tougher because there's a tendency to get complacent and arrogant, and next thing you know, you got a mess on your hands. But I don't believe that'll happen with Rob.
And one of the things that as you've shown me around Maker's Mark, that's really clear is that you have a family business that does things still in a very artisan kind of small batch way, and yet you're one of the major brands in the bourbon space. You're internationally recognized. How have you been able to maintain the kinds of things that get obliterated when people think about success or mass production?
Well, for the first 20 years of our association, or first 24 years with our association with an international spirits company, it wasn't quite so tough because we weren't on the radar screen. Plus the fact none of them had U.S. operations. So there wasn't any opportunities to screw it up. And now with Beam, how we're able to do it is thanks to the wisdom of a guy named Matt Shattuck, who's the president. He's got the authority to do anything he wants to, and he's more of a guardian maniac than either Rob or I. He's just brilliant, and I don't know why other companies haven't been able to nurture two cultures within one company.
Do you think that when you look at kind of the distinctly American company, which so many of which are shipping things overseas and working elsewhere, Makers has been, is a definitive American company.
Well, so's Beam. Lord, yeah. It's really. I mean, we're the two oldest of the distillers. Colonel Beam's great grandfather, and my four great grandfather. I think the two of us have the longest lineage of any bourbon makers in the world. Mm-hmm. So, but I still think that there would be opportunities to cheat, conserve, especially when we're so close to each other. If it were not for the wise leadership of Matt Shattuck, who, by the way, is an Englishman, not a U.S. citizen. He's very, very sharp, and it's great. And we love working with the guys at Beam. But I'm telling you, they're two very different cultures. Mm-hmm.
But yet they're able to mesh it. You're able to translate.
And we help each other all the time. They got technical staffs over there that rescue us almost on a daily basis.
Now I think again, people have a perception of when they see a bottle of Makers on the bar and the company behind it. The reality in terms of how you produce things, between constant construction and there's a much more ragtag aspect to it.
Yeah, there is.
How do you keep sane when you have power going out and boilers going over? And,
Everything gets stressed. It's just the way it is. You get people that are fast on their feet and are used to taking responsibility. And Victoria, our plant manager down here, is not a micromanager. So everybody's responsible for quality. Everybody's responsible for keeping trains on time. And there's constant pressure to get orders out to make sure that the distillery is not ever shut down, because those are commitments that we made 6 years ahead. Mm-hmm.
Now, most people don't realize that you have a special connection with the Jack Daniel's legacy, and that we talked a little bit about you going to Vanderbilt. What was your experience like? Going to school right across from the Jack Daniel's distillery.
Well, it wasn't a distillery. It was the office. It was a corporate office there in Nashville. And the back door of the law school led right into the front door of the Jack Daniel's offices. The Montlows had always been big supporters of Vanderbilt Athletics, which needed all the help it could get. And it was just an association because the Montlow families and my father were very good friends. And I was able to spend it. I really learned the business from Hap Montlow, who was Lem Montlow's son. He was the chairman and very gracious to give me so much time. It's 3 years, every Friday afternoon. And I wouldn't trade it for anything. Plus the fact they're now owned by Brown Forman, and there's nobody that I respect as much as I do the Brown family, and have had the good fortune to know all of them and know them well.
Mm-hmm.
So it's been so we've touched Jack Daniels all the way around. Anytime somebody starts talking about it, I get my boxing gloves up because I just think so much of them.
What was the biggest thing you learned from Hep?
The biggest thing I learned from Hap was passion for the business and respect for each other. He was as maniacal as my father was about we all hang together. And that's because I got to actually practice it with him. I actually got to go around and visit with the other distilleries, and I also got to witness the incredible contribution the Motlow family made to Vanderbilt. So I made that part of my life's work. I've chaired a number of university boards, and now chairing the university's capital campaign. All that directly a result of HAP.
Mm-hmm. Now, you said even though you're retired, you're still clocking in how many hours?
Well, I'm generally the first one in the office in the morning because I got to do a little, and on the weekends. Today's Monday. I was in Saturday and Sunday, which is normal, but maybe not for a retired person. But the pressures at the business is not really there. Rob takes care of the wars, and I just sneak in behind him, help him when I can. Mm-hmm. Whenever he asks, and am very busy in the community, which I enjoy. So I don't ever get home before 6, so my wife's okay.
Well, what's your favorite thing about having been involved with Maker's Mark and building into what it is today? Is there something that you always cherish?
Oh, there's an enormous satisfaction, and it's not something you need to see up on a billboard. It's an internal thing. How many people get to quarterback the development of one of the great brands of the world? Now, I didn't create it. Mom and Dad did all of that. They did the heavy lifting, as my father used to remind me in my early days. But we kept from screwing it up, and that's worth something. It's also great satisfaction watching my son take it up and him knowing the industry as well as he does and being with us for 5.5 years before he took it. Even though he's young, he's only 37. But
so he before he took it up, he was there almost as long as it takes for the whiskey to get ready to put in the bottle.
Yeah.
So he matured almost at the same rate as Bob.
A little bit faster, not much.
So one of the things you're leaving behind as legacy is Maker's 46.
Wow, it's my baby.
Not only is a product, but one of the things we talked about was the expansion to the category. So was that when you're starting to look at creating that product, were you looking at doing something different for whiskey? I mean, what was...
We basically had two criteria. The last thing we wanted to do was to get into the Me Too race of brand expressions, because I got to tell you, from where I sit as a red-blooded distiller, that's a pretty irrelevant, trendy kind of nonsense. If it creates great taste, great. If it's just selling a twist on a process and procedure, starts to sound more like marketing gibberish. So Kevin Smith, our master distiller, and I sat down and said, do you think if we cleared our head of all of our bias against doing anything and said, okay, we're going to create a legacy for me, so I've got something to put on my tombstone other than he didn't screw it up, what would we do? And how high would we want the bar? And so we really settled on, if we're going to do it, it ought to have implications for expanding the scope of bourbon and do it naturally and honestly. How can we provide an avenue of taste difference that is bourbon and creates a wow? And clearly the biggest obstacle, the yin and the yang of bourbon, is big taste, long finish comes with a kick. It's the nature of the beast. It's part of the beast. And we said, well, what if we could do that and not have the kick? Not have that bitter aftertaste. And so that's what we set out to do. And I don't think we'd have ever gotten there if we wouldn't have had that as a very specific objective.
What do you think, 10, 15, 20 years from now, what do you think Maker's Mark will be, and what will it look like, do you think?
That's a great question. I don't know. I think I can say without question that we're going to spend the next 2 years managing a limited supply. I'm almost positive of that, unless Europe blows up and we follow right behind them. But if the economy doesn't blow, I think the next 10 years we're going to have significantly less product than we've got demand. I see us staying true to our values. I see us being honest about what we've got, about not shopping for supply somewhere else and sticking it in a Maker's Mark bottle and all of those temptations. After 10 years, I don't know. I think a lot of it might depend on the bourbon trend. Unlike a lot of other trends, bourbon is more rooted in authenticity and reality, and it probably ought to sustain. Those of us that are interested in the Kentucky economy certainly hope so. But it might wane. We've been through, you got to remember, for the last time bourbon was really popular was 1918. It never really recouped after Prohibition. And so here we are, about 90 years later. It took 90 years to swing into the trough and come back up and become fashionable again. And I would suggest that what Mom and Dad did in creating the first real premium bourbon had a hell of a lot to do with the fact that all distillers are basking in the success. And we're doing it all together, and everybody's got really distinct, interesting products, and nobody has to apologize for anybody's, and there's a great feeling in that. But Mom and Dad got it started.
Mm-hmm. So what your mom is often cited as kind of the brain trust for a lot of the things that have ultimately defined Maker's Mark.
Well, you got to remember, we have a barometer because she and Dad went through school together. He really gets an awful lot of credit, and I always felt like he got more than he deserved. But just if you look at their academic records, because she finished first at University of Louisville in 1932, and Dad finished last. So you know how that goes. Smart people usually end up getting a little bit more done than the dummies.
And what do you think the biggest gift your mom, if you look and say, we're in the bourbon revival and there's now premium bourbon, what do you think your mom's big gift then was to both Maker's Mark and the whiskey space?
Well, I always say Dad really had the primary role, with a lot of help from folks, in creating bourbon that tasted good. So he brought the taste good to bourbon, front palate, and she brought good taste.
That's really cool. Well, thanks, and it's wonderful to see in your retirement that you're keeping just as busy as you were.
Oh God! Well, we're gonna have fun tonight. You'll enjoy these guys.
Great, thanks.